Hello, everyone, and welcome to another 508 Accessibility webinar. My name is Paul Reich. I am the team leader for the Soil and Plant Science Division's Communications and Outreach Focus team. We also have Debbie Sarabian, National Leader for Standards. Debbie will be helping with the question and answers session after the presentation. We are fortunate to have Karen Garrison join us today to present creating posters and presentations using PowerPoint that are Section 508 accessible. But first, a few housekeeping items. This is a Microsoft Live event, not a Teams meeting, which means you are joining today's webinar in listen-only mode. We encourage you to ask questions at any time using the Q&A panel. The Q&A panel should open by default. However, if for some reason your Q&A panel is not open, simply click on the question mark icon located in the upper right side of your screen. For closed captions, turn on the live caption button located in the lower right corner. Today's session is being recorded and will be available on the Section 508 team site and on the USDA NRCS Soil and Plant Science YouTube channel. Again, thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed today's session. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Karen Garrison, our Digital Accessibility Program Manager for Section 508. Take it away, Karen.
Thank you, Paul. It's a pleasure to be with you again for another session. Hopefully, we can get through some more 508 practices and standards and help you in your job, in all of your jobs. I'm sorry, not just Paul. You have to excuse me. I'm sorry. My allergies are acting up, so I will try not to clear my throat too many times. But my name, like he said, is Karen Garrison. I am the FPAC Section 508 Program Manager. I have been in this role for, since 2019. And before that, I was a member of the team, of the FSA team, before the reorganization. Currently, the team is only I. Unfortunately, over the last year, I've had members retire, go to other positions. So right now it is, I am the only person in this position, but I do have hope. I have 2 jobs open right now for 508 positions on the team. So hopefully we will get back up to strength soon. So today's session is about creating posters and presentations using PowerPoint. A lot of times on the screen, it will not say PowerPoints and posters, but the information will be for both since you're using the PowerPoint tool to create the posters. So the information will cover both. Okay, sorry. A little bit delay there. Just as a disclaimer, in speaking with Debbie and what she wanted for the training, I understand that you already have standards that are set up for you to follow for your creation of your PowerPoints and your posters. So I'm just saying that the information I'm providing you is based on standards, 508 standards, the WCAG, and general best practices. You will be required, you'll still be required to follow your agency's guidelines in developing PowerPoint documents and posters. So please don't say, oh, Karen told us we have to do this. I am just giving you the best practices or what can make it compliant. That does not mean, a good example is fonts. There are several different fonts that can be used. I'm just telling you what the best practices are, but your staff is coming up with great documents to follow and standards. So a lot of people are not aware. Section 508 is actually a law. We are required by law to follow that. We have to make our documents compliant. We have to make everything compliant. The only thing that is not required to be compliant, and that means documents, websites, everything, are documents that are only printed. So if and I have to be very careful when I say that, because only printed means they will not come up on your screen. You would not see this PowerPoint. You could only hit a button and print it. As far as I know, there are not many of those documents in USDA any longer. Everything is accessible. So that means internal and external are required to be Section 508 compliant. So this is the first law that came into place with Section 508, the Act of 1973. I am not going to read all this to you. I just want you to understand that we are required by law. Then we got the 21st Century Integrated Digital Experience Act. It came along and added a little bit more to it. This came out during Trump's administration. Then we got the Presidential Executive Order 14035 in June of 2021 under Biden's administration that went even deeper and spelled exactly more detail of what we needed to meet. And that's what I've got on this screen. It's just the section that applies to our team directly. The presidential order is huge. It covers so many areas: diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, everything. So disability statistics, just to kind of give you an idea of why this is so important. 22% of the world's population has some sort of disability. 69.8% of the US population with disabilities are living in a household with internet access. These numbers could be a little bit older. I think I got them a couple years ago, so I'm sure they're higher now. In the US, there are currently about 59.8 million Americans with a disability. 217 million people worldwide have moderate to severe vision impairment, which is expected to triple by 2050. And approximately 6.5 million people in the United States and 1 to 3% of the global population has an intellectual disability. In the US, about 74.6 million people have some type of physical disability. What is an accessible document? The first description is kind of the generic one that they use. It's an accessible document. It's created to be easily readable by a sighted reader as a low vision or non-sighted reader. I don't totally like that definition. I think that's too simplified. The second one is more how I feel like our job really applies. It's accessible documents that benefit all audiences by making information clear, direct, easy to understand, and most importantly, usable by a wide audience, including people with disabilities and those who use a variety of devices, software, and hardware. It's not just cited, but cited is really what we focus a lot on documents. And as we go through the presentation, you'll understand why. Making a document accessible is easiest and most efficient when it is done in the original stages of creating the document. I don't know how many hours I've spent trying to remediate a document that was created back in 2019. The person doesn't even work for the government any longer and maybe didn't have any sort of 508 knowledge. And I could spend up to 5 or 6 hours trying to correct a document. A lot of times they just have to be recreated. So please, if you can do it correctly while you're creating the document, it will make your life easier and the rest of our lives easier. The top 5 most common accessibility issues when creating PowerPoint and poster documents. Missing alt text. This one you're going to see repeated through the presentation multiple times. You must add alternate text to your images using the View Alt Text function, which can be accessed by right-clicking on any image. This is true of anything that you add, pictures, anything, images. I mean, there's so many different things. It is anything that if you looked at it, like you're looking at this page, you could see up in the corner it says USDA, United States Department of Agriculture. Now close your eyes. Do you see that? Well, no, of course you can't see that. If I have a screen reader, which is what people with vision disabilities use, I need that screen reader to read that to me and tell me what that is. It's either going to say emblem of USDA and then read United States Department of Agriculture, or there's several different ways the wording could be done for alt text. But the screen reader uses the alt text to tell somebody who has a vision issue, and it's not just a blind person. It could be somebody who just has diminished visible issues, that this is what you're seeing on the page. The important thing to keep thinking about alt text is how am I explaining what's on the page to somebody who cannot see it? When writing alt text, you should consider what you're trying to convey by using the image. If the image is purely decorative, you should mark it such as alt text options. They usually have an option that says it's decorative or it's not required. Different tools say different things. I believe most of them say decorative. There are things that you'll put on a page that might be just decorative. Maybe you don't feel like them seeing the USDA emblem is important because then it says United States Department of Agriculture. That's your choice. But please think about it. If you were reading this with a screen reader, what information would you want to hear? Incorrect reading order. A screen reader reads the elements of a slide in the order they were added to the slide, which might be very different from the order in which things appear. This is very important also. I don't know how many documents I've gotten, and I know, and I'm not referring to any certain group or thing, but I have gotten documents about events coming up, and they've asked me to check them, and they went in and added things at the last minute. So it may read up in the left corner and then jump down to the middle of the page and then go back up to the left corner again and go to the right corner and read. If I'm blind and I'm trying to follow what this document's saying, and you're jumping all over the page with the reading order, then I'm not going to be able to follow along. The lack of lists or incorrect use of lists. I've seen a lot of both of these. The lack of lists, a lot of times people don't think about making it a list. It's really simple. I mean, we have the use of the tool. It gives us the list. All we have to do is highlight what we want to be a list and choose it. But a lot of people don't. If you don't, then it reads each one of those individual items separately. If you say that it's a list, then it will start out for a screen reader and it will say list, and then it will tell you all the items. And I know some of these things seem really silly because we can see them, but if you just can't see them and you're just listening, and you just start hearing this list of things, you may not know what it applies to. You may not know that they're all related. You might just think, well, somebody just started typing and they just kept hitting enter or hitting return and making another item. A list will actually tell them that they are all related items. Slides not having unique titles. Good example, this page right here. If you look at the top, it's kind of may look unusual to some people. This might not have been the way you might have created this document because the top 5 most common accessibility issues covered 3 pages. Somehow I need to tell somebody who's blind, okay, we're on the 2nd page of that. Even though it may say 3, they may not realize that we've gone to another screen. So you have to make them different, because if I had not added page 2 of 3, it would have read the same title every time. And the way a screen reader works is they have the ability to go up to a title on a page. So if they said go up to the title, they're going to get confused about where they are. I mean, it's really hard, and it's taken me a long time using a screen reader to really be able to focus on it when something's being read to me and follow along. So titles are important. They need to be unique. Like it says here, for example, by skimming or using a screen reader, they can quickly scan through a list of slide titles and go right to the slide they want. It's amazing what screen readers can do. They have so many different keys and different options of how they can move through a document that they can go from title to title. And so if they maybe listened to this whole presentation, they thought, oh, I want to go back to those top 5 most common accessibility issues, then they can put in a command and it will actually go back to that page and start reading through there. Another one, color contrast. I'm sure we've all talked about these. I know they're identified in the standards guides. Color contrast is kind of an interesting one. I had one document once where it was a poster, and I don't know which group it came from. I don't remember who sent it to me to check. But at the top of the poster, they had used one color, and then they had it gradually decrease and get lighter as the page went down. Well, the top page of the color in the top of the page was not compliant. By the time it got to the bottom of the page, it was, but I had to test it all the way down, and then I could tell them, okay, this is where the color changed. Color is very important. A lot of times we don't think about it. It's very common, like I've got white and I've got black print, or people do the reverse. they do white print on a black background. That's pretty common, but once you start creating some other things and using some colors, you really have to be careful. There's some ratios here. These are based on the standards of what you're required. And the best way to, we don't expect you to memorize these, the best way to find out is to use the color contrast checker. And we'll talk about that further in the presentation. Excuse me. Basic principles of accessible documents, properties, and alt text. Document properties. Hopefully you're already doing this. I don't think I knew what document properties were and that I could change those. I don't know. I've been in the government 30 years and I probably didn't know it until I've been here 25 years. If you're using any sort of document, there is an area where there's document properties. They allow the creator to enter information, the title of the document, the author. You don't have to fill in all these fields. The more you fill in, the better it is. Search keys, that helps with readers, screen readers. The main thing is put your name in there and put your title in there. Some of that is filled in, but you can edit over it. We've gotten documents that somebody else created, or if you've copied a document from somebody else and kind of made it your own, it will keep that original creator's name in there. So you really should change that because it helps if somebody has to go back to that document and they want to change it, they need to change it for some reason, then they know who to go to. It's also important. I'm not sure if language is still identified or not. It used to be in an older version of PowerPoint. I'm not sure if it is in the current version. To set it to English, we did have some issues. There were some flaws with the software at one point where it was changing language to Spanish, German, and you'd look at your document and all of a sudden it was in a different language. It can be found by going to the file and then info. And then, like I said, you can edit that information. It is not permanent information. Once again, add alt text. I'm going to say that one over and over and over. If I can get you to do one thing after this training, it's to make sure you add alt text. Like it says, in most programs, you just right click on the object and select view alt text. It has changed a little bit in PowerPoint, but it is still the same thing. You still do the right click, and then it'll bring up the description. You used to actually get an option to edit alt text. It's a little bit different now, but it still does the same thing. It gives you a field that you can fill in. Using hyperlinks and screen tips. Hyperlinks are important. Once again, with the screen reader, hyperlink will read each character of a hyperlink. It will read dash, backspace, backslash. It'll read every single one of those characters. So what one of the best practices is to actually go into the hyperlink and change one of the fields, to change the text field to a shorter description. Please do not say click here or this will take you to here, or you have to say more description. Once again, you are describing for somebody who cannot see the words or cannot see where it's going to take them. To apply, go to the fillable. So like the example here, use a hyperlink that describes the item, such as to apply, go to the fillable college application, and then the URL will be the college application. So it will take them there, but what will actually read to the screen reader is what's in the text field. So think about that. I know some standards, some groups, their standard is not to do that. They want the whole URL. If that's what your standard is, then please follow that. This is a best practice. So it's up to you. That might change in the future, but that's at least tells you how to go out and change the hyperlink. You're actually going to change the text field. Screen tips. Type the text that you want to appear when the user hovers over the hyperlink. You know how you've gotten your mouse and you're moving around the screen and you see those little screens pop up to say, control. If you hit control and then it takes you to the URL. Those are kind of what the screen tips, what it's talking about when you hover over something. Screen tips can be created from the edit hyperlink pop-up screen. You have the option to go in, it's up in the right-hand corner and it'll say edit hyperlink pop-up. If you do not add a screen tip, the entire URL name will appear when you hover over the hyperlink. Next time you go on a document that's got links in it, just kind of roll over that link and see what comes up. If you go ahead and put in a screen tip, it will actually read the screen tip, and that's what the screen reader will read. So once again, it doesn't read that whole URL to them. It will read what's in the screen tip. That is optional. I don't know of anybody that requires that, but it is a good best practice. Avoid using spaces to format text. I've done this. I used to do this a lot. Boy, I want to get that. I want 5 spaces or 6 spaces. Just keep hitting the space. Well, each one of those reads as a blank or a space. I am sorry, I keep hitting my keys. Each one of those will read as a space or a blank to a screen reader. Sometimes if you have too many of them, I've seen people use them to create like table of contents. Instead of using the dot leaders, they will go hit the dot. Well, it's going to read each one of those dots to somebody with a screen reader. I know that sounds kind of silly to you because you can see the screen, but imagine if you were trying to get through a document and you're hearing dot. It's just not a good practice. The screen reader sometimes will also get confused. It will not know if that's an issue with the screen reading software or if there are just actually multiple spaces being used. So sometimes it will cause the user using the screen reader to kind of wonder if they're having problems with their screen reading software. So please don't do that. Don't use that as a way to do it, to make those spaces. Use the proper formatting tools. Include closed captions for all audio files. Accessibility is as important to individuals with low or no hearing ability as it is for people with sight challenges. Therefore, include closed caption for all audio files in a document or presentation. I don't know if you do audio files in any of your presentations. Most people are moving away from that. But if you do, please include the closed captions. And utilize the accessibility check tools in the newer versions of most programs. If you look under the review and all the tools that we have right now, there should be an accessibility checker. Please use that. It is a basic checker. There are checkers that do more. At this one, each checker has so many rules that it checks. I don't remember how much the accessibility checker does. I think it's like 50 to 60 rules that it checks. There are a lot more rules than that. So there are checkers that do more, but this is a basic. And a lot of times if you do use the accessibility checker, and you can have that open while you're creating your document, it will show you as you're going along. If you do something that's incorrect or is an error, it's going to tell you right then, and then you can correct it right then. You don't have to wait till you get the whole document done and go back and try to fix it. It will tell you as you're working along. If you use that, 80 to 90% of the time, that document's going to be perfect. There are some things it cannot check. It cannot check color contrast. Most accessibility tools that are out right now do not check color. They will tell you that you need to manually review the color contrast or that you might have color contrast issues, but then you have to go out and use another tool to do them. I think with the new artificial intelligence that's being added to a lot of the accessibility tools now, eventually we will have tools that do all the checking, but right now there are some things that just don't come up. It also cannot check the correctness of your alt text. I mean, I could type in that this is a test, and when the checker runs through, it doesn't know that me typing in this is a test is a correct alt text or not. So that's another one that it does not check correctly. Reading order. A lot of the tools do not check reading order. Basic principles of the accessibility documents for lists. I'm always surprised kind of how many people really don't know lists. They use them, but they really don't know the difference between them. And I can't say that I did before I started working with 508. Lists should be created using PowerPoint's built-in tools for ordered and unordered lists. Without using these tools, a list is not really a list. You can go in and put 1, period, space, and whatever your information is, and then go down and put 2 and 3. Those will not read as a list. It will say 1, period, blah, 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 which is fine, but that's not really the correct formatting for it. Creating lists manually by hitting the tab key to indent content does not create a list either. There are two types of lists used in PowerPoint documents, bullets and numbers. Bulleted lists are used for a group of items without an order. Numbered lists present a group where the number of items matter. So like if you're telling somebody, okay, step 1, I need you to do this, step 2, do this, then you need to use the numbered list. Otherwise, use the bulleted list. That means if I read the first point or read the third point, it doesn't matter. They're all related, but they don't have to be done in a certain order. Tables. Tables are tricky. Tables are tricky in any document, not just PowerPoints. Tables are, I don't know. They're probably the one thing that I've had more hardship with than anything else that I've worked on. A lot of times the older documents, we've actually just had to go in and recreate tables because they just are too difficult to be made compliant once they've been created certain ways. Tables should, and I know that you may be using tables in your documents, and I'm not saying don't use them. I'm just saying if you have a way around using them, please try that. Tables should only be used when absolutely necessary in organizing data and should avoid being used for decorative purposes. Tables can be very difficult for screen reader users to understand unless they include markup that explicitly defines the relationship between all the parts. That means, are your headers defined? Are your rows defined? Are your columns defined? I mean, unless you've done all of those things, then, then it's not good to use a table because it jumps around in the reading. Tables should be created in the PowerPoint or poster document and not cut and pasted. In most cases, any information that you're trying to convey in a table is usually more easily created as a list or another format in the document. I have worked with people in NRCS and other areas that are working on huge scientific documents, and they have these huge tables, and we try everything we can to make them compliant, and they end up breaking them up into smaller tables or lists or doing some other way because you spend so much time trying to do it that you practically do have to recreate the table. If you decide that you need to use a table, then create a simple table. A simple data table is one, and if this is not new information for you, I'm sorry, but I have to keep emphasizing this because I don't know what everybody's level or knowledge level is. A simple data table is one in which each cell corresponds with only one column header and one row header. In contrast, a complex data table is one in which there are nested columns or nested rows. Consequently, cells within the table correspond with multiple columns and or row headers. If you don't have a one-to-one relationship, if you have a cell and you've broken it into two pieces of information, but you have, one header and then two, it can't read it. There's no way just think about trying to walk through a table and not being able to see it and listening to it. And then they can move back the way they can use the screen reader, they can move back up to the header, they can move back into these different places, but if it's not in the right order, and once again, tables need to be top to bottom, the way they're read, top to bottom, left to right. So if you have a table you have a cell that's split, it doesn't know how to go back to that other cell and say, okay, I'm still related to you. So think about it. And I know there's some very complex tables in USDA, and they are very difficult to make compliant or they have to be recreated. Often complex tables can be simplified by breaking them into multiple simple tables with a heading above each. Avoid using complex tables if possible. For simple tables, the only step necessary for accessibility is to identify which row contains the column headers. That lets them know that is a point that they can go back to when they're using a screen reader. So just some simple table rules. Include a header row. Use a simple table structure. Avoid tables nested within other tables. There's just no way to resolve those. A lot of times what we've had to do is have the person leave the table in the document if it was required, and then they have to go down below that table and then describe the whole setup of that table in just plain language. And that's doubling your effort. It seems like a waste, but because somebody cannot use screen reader to read that table. We have to do something to make it compliant. Add alt text to the table. A lot of people don't realize you can put alt text in the table too. It can be time consuming to read a table with a screen reader. This will help them be able to maneuver through the table easier. Avoid blank cells if possible. Some screen readers, if they hit a blank cell in a table, it'll stop them. They won't know how to go on from there, and there's no way to override that. Put a dash in, put any sort of character in there, put a 0 if it's a number field, put something in that field, but do not leave empty blank cells. And don't use screenshots of tables. The reason I'm saying don't cut and paste, don't screenshot, you can't change those. Those are images that are created, and then they cannot be changed. They cannot be made compliant. The only way they can be made compliant is if you add alt text and you describe every field in that table. Can you imagine? I mean, that's just like having to recreate the table, but you're doing it in the alt text. So why do that if you don't have to? So don't cut and paste, create. I know it takes more time. I'm sorry. A lot of these things for 508 may take you a little more time when you're creating the document, but in the long run, when you have to go out and change them, or you have to run them through a compliancy check, they're going to pass because you've done them correctly in the beginning. So create it inside the document. This is kind of like a brain dump. This is kind of our team for several years has just kind of come up with all these different points that have come out of discussions, trainings, us working with staff members from the different agencies. So they're all over the place, but they're all good points. So I'll just kind of go through them, and then if you have questions, please put them in the chat of if there's a specific point that I won't cover or haven't covered. Use simple language. Communicate with your audience in a way that they can understand the first time they read or hear the document. Ensure that font size is sufficient. Once again, these are best practices, not necessarily what I'm telling you to do. You need to follow your standards. A minimum of 11 points, but 14 points is the standard. Use the most accessible fonts, which are, and I'm not going to read them all to you. I know Times New Roman has kind of become the new standard, but I know that's not what everybody wants in their documents. So, and these are not the only ones. These, once again, are the kind of the best practices, the ones that are used the most. I'm sure somebody's gone through and researched and checked with people to see which ones of these are easier to read. Please remember, if you're creating the document and the text looks good to you, somebody else may have trouble with that. And that doesn't mean that they're blind. They may not be using screen reader, but they may still have issues trying to read it. All of our eyes are getting older by using these computers all the time. And unfortunately, and I'm the same way, I'm up to bifocals. And there's times when even those don't help when I'm reading some of these things. So please think about the fonts you're using. Provide sufficient contrast between text colors and background colors. That's that color contrast issue again. It's kind of odd, but some of the best colors are some of the weirdest combinations. I had somebody that was on a 508 team from Washington send me a document, and I believe he used purple as his background color, and I can't remember, it was like a green color as his text. For me, it was very abrasive to look at. But when I tested it, because I was curious, I mean, I knew he knew all about accessibility and how to make things accessible. It actually passed, but it was a little bit abrasive. It was just too much color. So kind of think about that. Even if it passes, sometimes it might still be a little too much for people with all different kinds of vision issues. Do not use color as the only way to convey information. This probably is a point we should put on a page by itself and make it in bold print. Do not say, press the red button or, and I know in this case, you're probably not using a lot of those kind of things, but think about using color as the only way to convey information. Same way with making a letter bold, making it a different color, even highlighting. Be careful about how you use it and how you're describing it to somebody. Once again, go back to that premise of closing your eyes and thinking, okay, if I'm blind, can I see that something's highlighted? So you're either going to have to tell the person that the next points are important, or bolded. I mean, you're going to have to tell people that, because those type things like bolded, outlining, a lot of those kind of things that you can do to text do not read. It does not read to somebody and say bold and then read the word. It doesn't tell them that. The screen readers do not have that capability. So that's very important. Think about how you're conveying information. We see that a lot more on websites. Press the red button. Input your information in the green field. Don't use colors as being your only way to convey information. That's also when those tips can come in handy. If you have used colors somehow, a tip can also help somebody, especially if it's a field like they have to fill in something. It can be, you can say in the tip that this is a field that needs to have your name in it, or a field that needs this or that, and that will give the hint to the screen reader. Be careful with the use of watermarks. They can impact readability and create low contrast. They really pretty much just freak out screen readers. Screen readers don't know how to read watermarks. They just kind of shut down when they hit those things. So it's kind of hard sometimes, because we get documents, I know sometimes, that have those watermarks on them because they're either secret, top secret documents, or, something like that, or they're still in their draft, but you're going to have to remove that stuff to be able to test it. Use cut and paste as little as possible. Like I said, when you cut and paste, you get an image. It creates an image. Even though it may be a table, it's still going to be identified as an image. And then you're going to have to make alt text that describes that whole image. Do not use scanned information. It's the same thing. I don't know if scan gets used as much as it used to. Some of the really old documents we get, they scanned in pages of information. None of that can be changed. I mean, you just practically have to rewrite the document. If you do use a scanned picture, you also need to describe the scanned picture in the document. Otherwise, you will have to create alt text to describe the entire picture or image. There are times when I have seen tables or some sort of image that's been brought in, and then right below they make a little comment about what it is. There's several different ways to do that. But if it's a real detailed table or an image, then you're going to have to type all that out as alt text. As far as I know, there are no limits in alt text boxes of how much text you can put in there, but you still have to put it in such a way that it makes sense to a screen reader. Document tags. They must follow the visual and logical order of the document. Document tags really are more, especially if you create a PDF from your PowerPoint. A lot of offices are requiring that now. I know a lot of the work I do, especially for training courses for HR, they want a PowerPoint created, because they also put that out for people that have disabilities to use as a document to get the same information, just not using the PowerPoint forms. So document tags are added. Document tags, I mean, you'll have document tags in the PowerPoint. They are not things that you just can look at on the screen and say, okay, I know what that document tag is. You will see that more when you go through the accessibility checker. You will see how it identifies field as a title field, as a content field, as an image field. That's what we're talking about, document tags. Reading orders should be manually checked on PowerPoint documents. Reading order should always be from top to bottom, left to right, just like I said before. And that's the way your document should work. If you create a document and you think you've got that page done, and you go and work on another page, or you work on more of the document, and then you come back and you add something, you got to remember you've probably changed that order, that reading order. And it is important. A lot of times I find one of the biggest errors people have is it'll read the title of the page, but then it goes down and reads the page number. And you can change that in Accessibility Checker. It will actually let you move that. We might actually be able to demonstrate that at the end if we have time. But definitely, reading order is important. I just can't emphasize that one enough. When creating a PDF from a PowerPoint document, use the Save As Adobe PDF option under File. Do not use the Save As option. and change the file type. And I am guilty of this. I did this a lot before I knew that it was an issue. If you just use the Save As option, it will create a PDF without the tags or other required syntax that a screen reader needs. By using that Save as an Adobe PDF, it goes in and does some things automatically behind the scenes. You don't even have any interaction with it, but it creates these tags, it creates the reading order, it goes through and does all these things that you need. So like I said, I don't know if you'll need to create PDFs, but I know some of the offices are requiring that now to have multiple versions of the file. Do not overlay text boxes. Resize them to fit the text. I see this a lot of times, and once again, I'm sure I was guilty of this. I would use the template. It creates the text box. I've got the text box. I maybe use half the text box. And then I go back and I go, oh, I want to add a picture to that. I want to add an image. And I go in and add an image. Well, if that's a new box and it's overlaying the other one, then a screen reader does not know what to do. And I've seen this a lot with PowerPoints because we only have so much room to work in. We have to have these headers, we have to have these footers that say, USDA or whatever they have to say, NRCS, and we lose a lot of space in between to work with. Resize the text box. If you do not use the whole text box, then just get in the habit of doing this. Go in and resize it. Make it smaller, make it fit your text. And then when you add something else, you're not going to worry about overlaying that. If you overlay it, or you go if you go outside of the area that you can put in your text, that will not be read and it will not be compliant. You have to remain in that text box. So if you start typing and you go outside, then make the text box bigger. Don't just think it's going to read that. I don't get that error as many times now as I used to because I think I've kind of educated the people about it. But I got that a lot at first. People just keep typing. And I couldn't figure out where the rest of their words were because they were below or they were hidden behind the footer. Well, it's because they weren't adjusting their text box. So that's kind of it. That's important. And if you just get in the habit of doing it, if you don't fill up the text box, make it smaller, resize it. Do not paste pictures in text boxes. And I tried to think of better ways to describe this, but a lot of people will have the content box or the text box. They go in, they put in all their text, and then they want to add a picture. And that looks great. When you look at the page, it looks perfect. The problem is when you go to do the screen reader, it will read that twice. If that image is within another text box, it will read the whole big text box first, and then it will go back and read that image again. So you're going to be repeating the same thing. Make that a separate box. Don't make not everything has to go in that first content box. And a lot of you may already know this. You've probably had more experience with PowerPoints than I have, and you may know these things, but it's just kind of a good reminder. And once again, use the Check Accessibility tool under Review. It's easy, it's simple, and it will keep you from getting your documents back when they're reviewed with comments of accessibility issues, because you're going to be addressing them as you go along. Be cautious. This one doesn't apply to your group as much because I know you have the templates that you're using. A lot of groups still are not using templates. I suggest every group use templates and set them up, but not every group's that far along yet. Be cautious using the preset slide layouts or templates. They are, in Microsoft, they are supposed to be compliant, and they are in most cases, but the problem is some of them are very busy. They have a lot of shapes and extra pictures and all this pretty stuff that looks good, but they don't pass the color contrast testing a lot. And sometimes there's trouble with trying to get the text in without going outside the boxes, overlaying other text. So that's why having templates is great. That's a perfect process to follow. Be careful when adding text boxes. If the reading order of those text boxes is not correct, then your document will not be logically read by a screen reader. We all do this. We go through, and I probably did it on this presentation 500 times. I went through, I read it, okay, sound good. Then I decided, oh, no, I'm going to add this. And I added it to the middle of the page. Well, all of a sudden now I've changed the reading order. Same way with lists. If you go in and add one in the middle of your list, you need to make sure that that dot is out there. It's not going to automatically, it didn't automatically make it part of the list. You're probably going to have to go back in and you're going to have to select all of the information and hit the list button again, because it is not going to include that one list button that you may have added. A lot of people don't realize that until they have somebody check it, and then all of a sudden it's getting an accessibility error, or it's not part of the list. Most slide layouts include a slide title, usually at the top of the slide, and one or more placeholders, areas where you add content. I believe yours is like that. The title is important. Please do not remove titles. Titles are important. Some people don't think that each page has a title, but that they do. It may just be whatever's being covered on that page, like this one, accessible PowerPoint documents. And but that's important. You need to have that title. Please do not remove the title, because what it does is behind the scenes that creates an H1 header, and that is important when you start using a screen reader. But you will not see that. When I look at the screen, I don't see an H1 anywhere on this screen. That is all the syntax that's behind the scenes. Once again, alt text is required for any image in the PowerPoint. Do not select, this is important. Do not select generate a description for me. There is that button on there. People like to use it. If you want to try it out and see what happens. Usually what it does is pick the first sentence of your slide and use that as your alt text. So in this case, it might put, be cautious using preset slide layouts or templates. That's not good alt text. I don't know why they still have that button on there, but somebody probably asked for it and they added that, and it just is not very good. It's very poor quality usually. I just don't use it anymore because it's just frustrating. So, and I think I broke one of my own rules. I did. I am going to have to go back and change this document. As you see, as I'm going back through the pages, these all have the same title on them. They should not. I should have made page 1 of 2, page 2 of 2, page 3 of 3. So even I make the mistakes, but I'm learning. I'm getting better at it. Accessibility tests. Oh, did I go through all of them? Yes. Accessibility testing. Accessibility testing, I know you have a certain structure where you complete your document and it goes through approval process, and I know all that's being developed and worked on. But each person is responsible for doing their own accessibility testing. Accessibility testing includes reviewing your digital content against common standards and evaluating usability for people who use assistive technology such as screen readers. Boy, you can tell this came out of a probably some sort of guidance that was put out by somebody that knows accessibility testing. Those are definitely not my words, but it's conveying the same meaning. You're responsible for doing your own testing. The testing is to capture the information, make improvements, and meet the government digital initiatives. It shouldn't be down to one person to do. Just like me, I represent all of FPAC. So I don't know, last time I think they gave me a count, it was like 33,000 employees. If they all sent me a document, I'd be in very big trouble. I have to count on people developing their own documents and following standards the best way they can with their knowledge and with the tools they have. So you really need to be responsible for your own accessibility testing. And then whatever your other process is, if somebody goes back in and tests it, great. They run a test and it's perfect. That's great. They're going to be so happy with you. There are 2 types of testing. There's automated and manual. The FPAC Section 508 team currently employs a 3-part testing process. If you send something to us to test, or to me, this is the process that I follow right now. I use automated tools. Then I do manual checking for certain accessibility aspects, and then use screen reader software. The manual testing, usually in most cases, is doing like keyboard testing, which is really kind of another expected part of testing. It's actually seeing if I just use my keyboard and I type and I hit through it, say I don't have a mouse. Okay, take your mouse off totally. Don't use your mouse, and then just use your keys to move through the screen. Does it move through properly? Does it move from field to field in the right order? So that's kind of what the manual testing is talking about, and then using screen reader software. This allows us to thoroughly test documents. Manual accessibility testing is the process of inspecting your website or application by hand to check for accessibility issues. This type of testing is critical for catching issues that may not be caught by an automated test. Automated tests do not catch all errors. The companies will tell you that they catch between 80 and 90%. In reality, it's usually closer to 60 to 80% at the most, and that's the newer tools. Examples of manual testing include testing your document with a screen reader to make sure content is coherent when reading aloud, turning off your speakers and microphones to make sure the website experience is the same with or without sound, and navigating through a document with only a keyboard to ensure all content is accessible. A lot of this takes time doing it. If you can do all these steps and if you have time to do it and you go through it, that's great. If you don't have time, and I know we're all under really tight time constraints to get things done, at least use your check accessibility. It's part of the software. It's free. It will help. I guarantee you. Automated tools and software can test websites and documents for accessibility. They come with varying benefits and features. Like I said, these solutions can only determine 80-90% of their errors. That's usually a little bit high. Some of the newer tools are actually getting better. It just depends how many rules. That's the big thing that they can do, the companies can do, is how many rules they're checking. It's all dependent on them. A lot of the newer softwares now, they work with you to set up and establish rules, and then maybe you internally have your own rules. Sometimes there are some things set up by USDA that are not, they're part of the standards, but they're not as detailed in the standards as we want them in USDA, like having a header with this in it and a footer with this in it. So this kind of things, they can't check for that, but some of the newer tools are starting to add rules based on what your need is. Most of them, like I said, they can't correctly identify reading order, color contrast issues, and or correct tag names. A good example of why using automated testing tools alone is not a good idea is that an automated tool can identify that alt text exists for a picture in a PowerPoint, but it can't confirm that it's a good description. We have some tools that we have licenses that we hold licenses for the FPAC section program. We have their licenses that are available to all the staff under FPAC. We have Common Look Office. It tests and remediates accessibility issues in Word and PowerPoint documents and create PDF documents from Word or PowerPoint documents. So it kind of does two things. It does the testing, remediating, and then you can also create the PDF. It will add all that syntax behind it so that the PDF is compliant. Common Look PDF, it tests and remediates PDF documents. Some of this is just general information for you. I know that's not specifically what you're working on as PDFs. NVDA or JAWS is screen reading software. JAWS licenses right now, if I understand correctly, and I've been in a lot of meetings about this, JAWS now is reserved for employees who ask for reasonable accommodation. If you have any sort of disability and you want JAWS, otherwise NVDA is a free tool. You can get it on your computer, and all you have to do is fill out a ticket. I think it's, the software above what's loaded on your computer or whatever, but NVDA is a screen reader. It's been certified. You can have that one. Color contrast analyzer. There's several different ones. They're free. That's a good thing. All the color contrast analyzers pretty much are all free. There's one through WebAIM. I think a lot of groups use that one. There's one called Color Contrast Analyzer, like it just says there. I think it's actually listed as CAC out on the certified software list. I'm not quite sure what happened there. I've tried to get it straightened out, but if you tell them you want color contrast analyzer. It's also free. It's certified, and all you have to do is put in a ticket to get it. It does a little bit more than WebAIM. It does the same thing. You have to identify the foreground and the background color, and you do that by using a pointer and pointing in the picture, pointing where you want it to be. And then you can actually change that color if it's not compliant the way it is when you first test it. You can actually change. It has little slide bars that you can change, and then it gives you the code of the color. I know that the standards are set by your teams, and so you need to go with those colors. But if you ever have to do any testing on your own for something else, then these analyzers are good tools, and they are free. I don't know why it's great that they're free. Most tools are not free anymore. So the Microsoft Check Accessibility Checker, like I've talked about, mentioned it so many times. It is it's part of the tool. It can be used PowerPoint, Word, Excel, Outlook, OneNote. It's found under Review on your toolbar. And once you find it, it says Check Accessibility. Then these are the options that you have. You have Check Accessibility, Alt Text, Reading Order Pane, Options, Accessibility, and then your Help. It consists of, and I just went through those, but it kind of tells you here what they do. The Check Accessibility opens the inspection results. That's the one that you might want to leave open the whole time you're working on the document. And what it does is just open a column. I think mine pops up on the right-hand side. You can probably move it around. I've just never tried. But you can have it open on your right-hand side. And as you're working on your document and adding things, it's going to tell you, whether you need to review it. You almost feel like it's coming watching over your shoulder going, oh, you didn't do that right. It will pop up just immediately as it's done. If you put spaces in, too many spaces, it will tell you about that. I mean, it does it all. Alt text, it opens a box that you actually enter the alt text. You will see it. It'll be a big empty box that's just free typing. You just type it in, and it also gives you the option to mark it if it is just decorative. And when I mean decorative, it'll be like the last slide in my screen. I have a big check mark. That means we're in the question part of the session. That I marked as decorative. Alt text is kind of an interesting area. There's a lot of different philosophies in the 508 world about alt text. Some people feel like it should all be marked as decorative, and that you should always define somewhere else in the document what that is. I don't agree with that. I think there are some things, to me, if there's 4 cows in the field, unless there's some reason why I need to know what those 4 cows are, then that's decorative. Because if I'm blind, I don't really care about hearing about 4 cows, to be honest. So that's kind of how you define that in your mind is. But like I said, there's some people that feel like any image should be decorative. That's not correct. But, since alt text is something you have to manually check a little bit more often, people kind of develop their own philosophies behind alt text. The reading order panel is great in this tool. It shows the current reading order and allows the document creator to change the order. You can actually move something up or down and put it in the correct order. And that's great, because if you had to go back in the document to do it, it's a lot more confusing to try and do it in the document than to do it over here. And a lot of times these checkers aren't interactive with the actual document. They just tell you what the errors are, and then you have to go figure them out, how to fix them. This one actually lets you fix it in the reading order panel. And then options, accessibility, it gives you different options of how you want to do it. Do you want it to automatically open? Some people just have it automatically open every time they go into a new document or go into a document, it just opens. I don't, because I use other tools to check too. I kind of use it more as a secondhand checker, but for somebody who doesn't have the other tools, leave it open the whole time. You'll get used to it being over there. These options can be opened up and left open while the document creator is actively working on the document. Accessibility training resources. I know a lot of the things are being developed in your groups. Your groups are doing, NRCS is doing a great job of putting resources together for their staff. These are just some other areas, some other things There is an FPAC Section 508 calendar of events. It's in Confluence. I try to keep it up to date. I'll be honest, since I've been doing 508 by myself, haven't been so great at doing it, but there are tons and tons of seminars, trainings. Just put in a search, just put in a Google search for any specific subject. You'll find YouTube videos. You're going to find everything out there. And a lot of them are free now. There's also even conferences that are free that are online, which are really nice. That kind of came out of the COVID period where nobody was going to actual live conferences, and a lot of them have just stuck with the virtual idea. So that's great. I have DQ University. It is where my software comes out of for my checking websites, and they have something called DQ University. They're kind of an extensive curriculum. I have licenses if you're interested in more detailed 508 training. It tells you what to do there. You just need to send me an email. That is the shared mailbox for the Section 508 team. Someday I will have a team again, and there'll be multiple people checking it. Right now, I do the best I can, but it's better to send something about 508 to that box than to me directly, because I don't want it to get lost with other emails. Another good source is the new Creating Accessible Content, Section 508 and WCAG 2.1. I've mentioned WCAG a couple times. That's what 508 standards are based on. It is a huge document that covers everything. The tools, when they do their testing, are based on WCAG standards. So usually any error that you're going to get in any sort of tool in 508 is going to correlate back to WCAG. The original one was WCAG 2.0. Then they've gone to 2.1, which just added to 2.0. Instead of rewriting the whole thing, they're just adding pieces to it now, because it takes about 3 or 4 years to get new things added to it by the time it gets reviewed by all of the people it has to get reviewed by. And then 2.2 is getting ready to come out. And I think it's going to be more about focusable points, which is more really to do with websites and not documents. But they keep adding new standards. So that's what WCAG is. It's all the standards that everything's based on. Email methods, like I said, the best way to get hold of me if you've got questions or anything, or you need help with something. I do one-on-one sessions with people with documents. If you got a document and you really want to know, you don't want it just to be fixed or tested, you want help. That is, I can set up a session. I really enjoy that part of the job more than a lot of the other things like reporting and things like that. So I appreciate it, just like doing this training sessions. I really love this because the more I can train people to do things correctly, the easier my job gets. Then, like I said, there's a Confluence site. I'll be honest, once again, it was in the redesign phase when I had another staff person. He left in January, and nothing has been done since until I can get some more staff to work with me, to be available, which nobody is, which I understand. We all have a lot of work to do. Then there's some other places, like I said, the US Access Board is great. They do a lot of trainings, and they do training and everything. If you're interested in things besides just 508 documents, things like that, they go into reasonable accommodations. You may, just to throw it out there, Section 504 is more about reasonable accommodations. There's a lot of information out there. If you have somebody in your life that maybe has an illness or has a disability, the training is great and it's free. The World Wide Web Consortium is where the WCAG standards sit, and they are the ones that keep them up to date, change them. GSA has an excellent website with so much information. I just can't even go on about it. It's just really good. I refer to it all the time. And then FPAC Section 508 calendar of events, once again, like I said, it's not as up to date as it should be. So last page, my question mark is an image with no alt text. So that's a lot of information. I know it is. Gosh, it'd be nice if I could ask you, but I know there's enough people on that we can't do that. But if you picked up one thing, please let it be either you're going to use the accessibility checker, you're going to make sure you have alt text, you're going to color contrast, you're going to check your color contrast if you need to. Now, if you're being given provided standards, you follow those because I'm sure they've already been checked. Just one or two things can make a huge difference. And I know at the beginning I had all the laws that are related to 508, but we really do have a moral obligation to make it so people who are disabled can also work at USDA and can use the websites and can read the documents and can do their jobs. For a long time, I had a person on my team that was actually blind, and I learned so much more about that whole world and 508 by working with her that I appreciate that experience, but I also understand how frustrating it was for her, for how many tools that we actually do have that are not compliant. We keep trying to improve that, but there are tools that we have that just cannot be used by somebody who has a handicap. And I learned a lot, and especially about screen readers and providing information. And she called me on the carpet a lot of times about things I would do. So I will tell you, if you send me a document or you even send me an email, sometimes I'm going to run it through a checker, because she just kind of taught me to always be on point about 508, because there are so many, employees, and a lot of people you may not even know that they have some sort of disability. I had another person on my team that I didn't know for a long time did. And then once we found out, we dealt with that. Same way with this training. This is really about your documents, but if you're going to be doing presentations, that's like a whole nother training session about how to present to people with disabilities, because there's a lot of things you can do that can assist in people being able to access your information. So that's all I have. Like I said, I know it's a lot. I'm sure for some people they're thinking, oh my gosh, I can't do all this, but you can. It just becomes second nature. It just takes a while. It's like anything you practice and you keep doing it, it will get easier. And it's a lot better if you could do it while you're creating a document, because if it has to go back and forth to somebody who's reviewing it and then go back to you, it takes a lot longer to get something done. So if you can do it correctly and compliantly the first time, that's great. It will make your life a lot easier.
All right. Thank you, Karen.
Sure.
We have some questions. Actually, the first two are similar. They asked about, is there a way to manually set the order after the fact, or like, can you reorder items in the presentation after everything's been added as needed?
Yes, bring up the accessibility checker. That is going to be your easiest way to do it. And I say that from experience. I can go into a document and go through and do it a little bit, but it's a really hard thing to teach people. The easiest way and the most time efficient way is to bring up that accessibility checker and bring it. I wish I had put in more screens, and I'm sorry about that, about how it works and how it looks, because you can actually physically move up the points and you'll see it. Some of them it will probably say like the title, it'll have title, and then it'll show the words, some of the words, and then it'll show content, and then it'll show image. You can move those up. It's like an arrow. I think it's an arrow, and you select the arrow and it just kind of bumps it up one space, and then you just bump it to where it is, and it'll show you the order. And you click on them, it will show you in your screen which piece it is talking about. So if you're not sure what the title is on your screen, it will say title. If you click on it, highlight it, it will show you in your screen which field is the title. So it's really, I'm sure nobody will have trouble using that. And I had really not played with it much until I was getting ready to do this training, and I started using it, and I was really impressed. They have really developed that piece of that tool. So yeah, use the checker.
Yeah, the reordering is pretty slick tool. Like you said, you
Yeah.
click on it, it'll highlight it where it is, so you can run through and it'll move the box will move so you can see what order it's in. And if it's out of order, like you said, you can just reorder it.
Right. And then the old-fashioned slower way is to do the tab. You know, some
Mhm.
people can't. There are people with disabilities that cannot use a mouse. So they have to only use. I work with somebody who only uses his keyboard. And so even do that. That will show you, but that won't really tell you how to move it. The accessibility checker is going to be the best way to do it.
All right. Next question is, can you discuss best practices for alt text for maps since they are inherently visual?
Ooh, wow. That's a tough one. NRCS has introduced me to a whole new world of maps. Up to this point, a lot of the maps have received exceptions. And I will say, people will say, oh, can we get an exception for this or that? There are very few exceptions in the 508 world. They're becoming less and less because people like DOJ are watching us and OMB is watching us, and they're not letting us do those things as much as we used to. But there are some tools that are coming out, and I have heard, and I can't remember which group I was working with, but I believe that NRCS was looking at purchasing a tool that will do that for you. At this point, there really isn't. You're really either going to have to explain somehow down in the content, the text, what is going on. And I understand, and I am getting a better understanding of NRCS maps and how complex they can be. We have actually granted a couple of exceptions to documents that have mapping in there. It is just kind of on a base by base type thing, and it usually requires having a meeting with me and you showing me what's happening. But I know some of the maps kind of move fields, and it would be something you would have to have vision to be able to do. So we'd really have to walk through it one by one. But in most cases, the mapping is either you're going to add it in the alt text, or you're going to add it into the actual presentation somewhere. You're going to kind of spell it out a little bit. You're just going to have to kind of explain to somebody who cannot see the picture what's going on in the picture. So I know that's not the greatest solution. I know that there is some really good software coming out that's helping with that. And like I said, from what I understand, I had heard that NRCS was looking into acquiring some of that software. So you might even want to check with your management and see if they have purchased any of that, because not all of that comes through me. Sometimes the management does that separately and I don't know about it. So in this case, I don't know if they purchased it yet, but I have definitely heard that that was a strong possibility.
All right. Next question. They ask about, is it another reason to avoid using scanned images due to the decreased resolution? They said what might not seem blurry to them, is it blurry to someone else with impaired vision?
Well, that is definitely, I mean, some of the older documents I've seen, some of the scans were really bad. I think scanners are much better now, but it really, the reason to stay away from them is just because you can't do anything to them. You can't, the only thing you can do is do alt text on them. You can't actually, the screen reader will not read it. It will say that it's an image or a picture, and that's all. So if you've got a lot of information in that picture, you're not going to get any of it. So you're going to have to describe it in another way. So that's really it. The resolution part, yeah, it depends. A lot of the scanners now are coming in and they're very clear, but some of the older documents, they're really bad because you could even see that the paper was discolored that they used. So any other way, I would guess, just guess, that eventually scanners somehow will be able to be allowed. They will figure out a way to make it so you can use a scanned image and it will be able to be compliant. It may already be in place, but we don't have anything like that at USDA yet. So we're still saying the message is stay away from it if you can. Just use it as a last resort, and then you're actually going to have to go in and describe what's in the scan.
All right, next question. Will FPAC be providing screen readers to employees to assist us with creating compliant documents?
Yes, that's the NVDA that I had on the one screen. NVDA is certified. It's free. JAWS, JAWS is what used to be the old standard. When I first started in 508, there weren't any other screen readers. It was just JAWS. But JAWS has become so expensive to buy an individual license that the policy is now through CEC that they will not buy individual license unless they have a disability. So you would have to go through the process of filling out reasonable accommodation paperwork for it. Because I know I've been rung over the coals about this one. And if they do give it to you, what they do is they give you a version of JAWS that you can use for 40 minutes and then it shuts off. It's almost like a test version of it. And that is horrible. I would not suggest that. That would be so frustrating. So just get the NVDA one. I think it actually does a little bit more. It actually lets you, you can actually create a document from what it reads. It gives you a transcript. JAWS, the last version I had, JAWS did not let you do that. So NVDA, and like I said, just put in a ticket. You don't have to have, well, I don't know how your process is if you have to go through your management, but you can put in a self ticket through CC and get it.
All right, thank you. Next question. Are there any pre-made templates available for our reference or usage?
That question I'm going to kind of leave with your management because I do know that there are templates that have been developed to be used. There are templates if you're doing something else. I don't want you to say, Karen told us we can do this, but all of the Microsoft, when you go in and open a new document, there are templates. All of those are supposedly compliant. So there are, I don't even know how many templates there are out there now. And they are compliant to a certain extent, but like I said, part of the problem is the coloring on some of them is not good. They add a lot of pictures and you lose a lot of space to add your information. So their kind of concept, Microsoft's concept about PowerPoints are only supposed to be like basic points. They're not really supposed to provide a lot of information, but I don't agree with that. If I'm going to go the trouble to do a PowerPoint and put information, I don't want to lose my space to pictures and different things that I can't write over. So once again, go back to your standards. Like I said, I think I've seen a template for both posters and PowerPoints. And please remember, a lot of the things I said, they are the same for posters or PowerPoints. It's all the same basic principles and standards of 508. The only thing I know, sometimes posters do get really busy, so reading order is very important in your posters. I got one that I finally sent back and said, I'm sorry, I don't think it was created in PowerPoint, which I think will benefit your group that you're using PowerPoint. They used a different tool and it was a mess. We never could get it sorted out. They had to recreate it. So I think using PowerPoint for posters is going to be great.
And I'll just add for NRCS Soil and Plant Science Division staff, we do have all of our templates hosted on our FPAC NRCS Soil and Plant Science Division internal review teams site. You can find it under the Files tab or the Notebook of Information. So you can find poster and PowerPoint presentation templates there. Next question, and our last question, can we get an example of a well-designed scientific poster or presentation that meets all requirements?
I can send you some. I'm trying to think if you say scientific. Now, when you say scientific, I'm not sure if I have any posters. That's kind of a new area. I have not really had a lot of inquiries about posters. You could definitely send me one and I can do a quick check on it and see if it is. I'm sure it probably is compliant, or if not, I'm just trying to remember if I had one and I don't know that I do, but documents. See, I think the philosophy's kind of changed, and I'm not saying it's just an NRCS, but kind of going away from it being documents. I've looked at had a lot of scientific documents come in, which can be interesting because some of them are like 200 pages and that takes a long time to work through, but I don't know that I've had a lot of presentations. But I'm not sure when you say scientific, what would be different than than what I did today with this presentation, except you probably have more images, more charts, graphs. But either one, I can look at them and let you know. But I think, like I said, I think your team's doing a great job of getting the templates out there. I know that's not the whole document being correct, but I can definitely provide any assistance, like on one-on-one, if you've got one that you're working on. I'll just have to look through. I'll work with Debbie and see what we can do. Definitely examples.
Oh, there was another question that came in.
Okay.
Can you post the name of the free screen reader that they can request?
Yeah, well, it's actually,
Or go back to that. Yep.
oh, did I go past?
They just want to make sure they've caught that name
Yeah,
correctly.
no, it's NVDA. I would have to go out and look. I don't even remember what NVDA stands for anymore, but if you just put in your request, you'd like the screen reader software NVDA, they'll know what it is. I have found that unfortunately CEC has put some softwares out there and not kind of named them correctly. So like the color contrast analyzer, I said, I think it's CAC out there instead of CCA. But if you put color contrast analyzer, they'll either contact me and say, what are they talking about? Or they will figure it out on their own and get you the right one. But definitely. And then WebAIM is free. I didn't even put that on here because I use the CCA all the time. But I can definitely send the information for that too.
Right. And then I think there's just a quick comment about serif fonts.
Okay.
Like TNR should be avoided.
Okay. There's a long list of avoidance. I mean, unfortunately, yeah, I mean, like I said, I listed the standards. If you go out and do searches, there's lists of ones that are good. It's really subjective because it's kind of an odd thing I've found as I've worked along. There are things that I can look at, and I wear glasses, and I bifocals, but there are things I can look at that I can't read at all. And I think that's part of the issue with a lot of these things is there's people with all different levels of vision. There's people that have great vision, and there's people that have really bad vision, and some people have, conditions that cause whatever their vision problems are. But the thing is to just kind of get a standard. And like I said, I know the standards guidelines that you have has some different things in it for your standards of what to use. I just don't want to overrule that. I don't want to say don't use those because I don't know what they are for sure. I didn't look at all of them, but I'm sure that they have gone out and researched and found out which ones are better. A lot of times with fonts, it's not so much the font you use, it's the size. You can use the same font, but look at it at a 12 size and look at an 18. There's a lot of people that really feel that for presentations like PowerPoint, you should be using an 18. Some of my pages are 18, some of mine are 23. The thing is to try to make it as big as you can, still get your information in, because the bigger you make it, the more people will be able to see it. It's a different world than when we used to have a room and we'd have 100 people in a room and people in the back of the room couldn't see it. On the screen, it's a little bit better in a lot of ways, but for some people it's not. But people that have vision issues know how to make the screen bigger or smaller to help them. So, kind of sticking with a standard is usually the best thing. I just kind of stick with Times New Roman just because that's kind of what I've been educated, but I could go to another training class and they would say use a different one. It's really just what your group's going to decide that is the standard.
All right. Well, that wraps up our Q&A session. I want to thank Karen for giving us this great presentation today and some things to think about and tools to go back and use. And thank you all for attending this Section 508 training, creating posters and presentations using PowerPoint. Thank you.
Thank you.